It has been my policy ever since having had it ground into me when I ran Universal Studios in Asia Pacific region in the 1990s to always get at least 3 bids for everything before picking a winner. But occasionally I come across someone who I just know knows what they're doing and are the best in their class, and today's guest, AJ Wilcox, founder of B2Linked, falls into that category. Hi there, Adam Gower here, and you are listening to the real estate crowdfunding show syndication in the digital age at gowercrowd.com. Well, I must say I have been very fortunate during this downturn that our private clients here at Gower Crowd have, far from withdrawing from the morass around us, instead decided to double down and capture market share. I love that attitude to chaos. Don't cower from it, embrace it to win. And as part of the strategy that we've been employing to help clients capture that market share is in advertising campaigns. Now, there are a myriad ways to use paid advertising, as you know, to raise money. Once you have a phenomenal online presence in place first, of course. And of those that are tried and tested social media platforms, Facebook, Google, and LinkedIn are the first choices for paid advertising. My guest today, AJ Wilcox, is the world expert in LinkedIn advertising, and it has been a pleasure working with him on as many projects as we have. Now, LinkedIn ads have a reputation for being one of the most difficult to crack because the clicks are expensive, and so any mistake becomes an expensive one. What's really easy to miss is that it's also the channel that closes the largest deals. And you're going to learn in today's podcast exactly how you can do that. Now, before I introduce AJ to you, do me a favor, will you? And be sure to go to the newly upgraded gowercrowd.com website. I always test new ideas on my own stuff before rolling them out to clients. And there are a bunch of new pop-ups, sidebar calls to action, and lead gen forms, all of which you'll get some free training from if you click on them and sign up. But the reason I'd like to encourage you to sign up for something, anything on the site, is so that you can see how these funnels work. Picture your own website with similar tools on them and then email me using the contact form there at gowercrowd.com, and I'll show you how you can implement the same systems yourself so you can raise money on your website. All right, that's all there at gowercrowd.com. And of course, be sure also to go to the podcast page for today's episode to find links to AJ and his company B2Linked. Alrighty, from the man who handles more top 10 LinkedIn advertisers than anyone else, who has spent hundreds of millions of dollars on LinkedIn ads, imagine that, and who runs the only agency that is a certified LinkedIn partner. Let's get into it with AJ Wilcox, founder at B2Linked. AJ, what a pleasure it is to see you. And for anybody who is just listening to this podcast, I strongly recommend that you do check out the video, because AJ is the first person I have ever met and ever talked to on a podcast who is actually walking. He's got some kind of weird contraption over here that he's walking on. You can tell us about that in a minute, but it's a fascinating thing. I should hook it up to my Peloton. Anyway, AJ, let me ask you a question. Now, I don't want to ask leading questions, but I'm going to. I know that your life is all about LinkedIn advertising, so I'm going to ask you a totally leading question, an unfair leading question. Here's how it starts. Why is advertising on LinkedIn so expensive?
Yeah, actually, as of this morning, the time of recording, I just released a podcast episode that I've been holding it back for a while because I was really afraid of the implications when LinkedIn listens to it. I don't know if anyone from LinkedIn will listen to it, but basically, I mean, if you ask LinkedIn, they'll tell you, hey, it's an auction. It's totally fair, totally based off of competition. And if it costs a lot, it just means that your audience is worth a lot to some other advertiser that you've got to beat out. I'm a little skeptical on that. I think when you especially compare with Facebook, people just don't spend as much time on LinkedIn as they do on Facebook. that creates less ad inventory and makes people, basically you have to bid higher to get in front of your target audience. But I also think that there might be something like, it's kind of nagging in the back of my mind. There might be something wrong with the auction where it's artificially expensive. But I don't know. I haven't been able to get that out of a LinkedIn employee yet.
I don't imagine. I think we should have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I've tried.
But it has to. All right. So my next question is it effective?
Yeah. What we find is when you drive traffic from Google and Facebook, these are both platforms that perform extremely well when you're going after smaller purchases. Facebook, you can hit someone by what they're interested in. Google, you're hitting them by what they're searching for and what they're excited about. But what you can't get is this ability to filter out the tire kickers and the mom and pops who, by the time they get to your sales team, the sales team is saying, oh, these guys are low quality. I just had to get rid of them. And so LinkedIn, we know, is 4 or 5 times more expensive than Facebook, but we also know that because we could be so specific about the targeting, we can get to where every single impression, every single click is coming from our absolute ideal target audience, and the sales team doesn't have to throw it out. So yes, LinkedIn ads can be incredibly successful if you have a large deal size or lifetime value to make paying more for the clicks up front worthwhile.
So this is a very important point that you make, and actually dovetails into my next question, which was who should advertise on LinkedIn? Now, you and I just went through a major campaign together for a sponsor who is raising capital for real estate, right? So trying to raise equity capital. So one of the terms that you've used in the last couple of minutes is for your sales team. Now inside a real estate developer's shop, we're not selling. I mean, there's investor relations, but there's no product necessarily to sell in that way. I mean, actually, there's securities technically, but you know exactly what's involved because we've just been through it together. Tell me something about what is the ideal profile of somebody who is wanting to advertise on LinkedIn?
Yeah, and I use the terms like sales team. I talk a lot in B2B because probably 90% of our clients are business to business, but we also have quite a few smaller B2C segments like the crowdfunding so anyway, I might use the wrong words here, but basically the best type of person to target on LinkedIn or the best person to advertise, like we mentioned a couple minutes ago, you have to have enough value on your back end that you can afford to pay LinkedIn $8 to $11 a click on the front end. You have to be able to define who your target audience is by their job title and industry and company size. If your target audience is just, females 25 to 45, man, you can get them a lot cheaper by buying a billboard or radio ads or Facebook. And then I think third, you've got to have something attractive enough that people will be willing to opt into, because if in B2B terms, if we just put an ad out there that said, click here to talk to our sales rep to buy something, most of the time people would look at that and go, yeah, I'm not here on LinkedIn to engage a vendor. I'm here to learn and grow and connect. So we usually have to give them something meatier, something they're more excited about that they're willing to actually opt into and click on.
So let's talk about that. Before we do though, I think I really want to do you justice. Normally these days, I don't actually introduce my guests. I do it in an intro that I record beforehand, but tell me that I record afterwards. But actually do please tell our listeners today a little bit about your experience. And the one thing that stands out is how much have you actually spent on behalf of clients on LinkedIn advertising? Let's just contextualize who you are a little bit.
Cool. We've spent over $130 million on LinkedIn ads so far. So that's, we're the only ad agency. There might be others by now, but when I started the company back in 2014, we were the only agency who exclusively focused on LinkedIn. Because of that hyper focus, we've gotten to work with many of LinkedIn's largest accounts, largest spenders, and what's so cool about getting to work with them is you get to experience a lot of scale and data and testing that is so much faster. And then we've been able to take those same strategies from the Fortune 500, the largest accounts, and apply them to very small ones as well. And the strategy carries quite nicely.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So now adding to my list of about 400 questions, I'm just adding a few more that you reminded me that I want to ask you.
Correct.
So these are going to be all out of any kind of logical orders. But I do want to ask you this. Well, you started when? 2015, was it?
Yeah.
You said
2014, end of 2014, early 2015.
Okay, so this also kind of dovetails into other questions coming up later. But why did you choose LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Particularly, and not Facebook or Google or Twitter or YouTube, for example? Why LinkedIn?
Yeah. Two answers for this, but I'll go with the main one. I started out my career as a search engine optimization guy. And so I was very well acquainted with Google, very well acquainted with even Google AdWords. And what I found very quickly is when I went into the last company I worked for, I was running all of my SEO strategies. I was running Google ads. I was running early Facebook, and far and away, LinkedIn just beat every other channel. And because I was managing everything, the one platform where the sales team is screaming, yes, please give us more of that, it got more of my attention. So I continued to give attention to this channel and invest until I grew it to become LinkedIn's largest spending account, and ended up with really good relationships with people at LinkedIn who would give me inside information and cool access. And I eventually just bought into it like, wow, I am so invested in this platform. I know the nuances. I don't hear anyone else out there talking about it. Maybe that could be me.
Yeah, very interesting. Nobody else talking about it intelligently.
Yes.
Let's put it that way, right?
Yes.
Right, and the kind of detail that you do. So let's jump back to what you were talking about a moment ago. You talked about needing something meatier. So from a real estate developer's perspective, looking to raise capital, let's talk about, again, kind of through the lens of our mutual experience recently with this campaign. What would that mean for a real estate developer raising money? What does it mean to have something meaty? And let me actually just kind of contextualize that by thinking in terms of what are the best strategies for advertising on LinkedIn. Is it best for building a network? Is it best for asking for sales calls? Is it best to directly sell something from the ad? So what do you, in that context, what do you mean by something meatier that you have to offer when you're advertising on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So to put this into perspective, from an ad, you're buying that space. You can ask anyone to do anything you want. And there's this whole range of, we could ask them to do something very light, like come and read this blog post, or we could ask them to do something very heavy, like hop on the phone with a sales rep or buy something. And I don't recommend the extremes on LinkedIn usually, because with a blog post, you're going to pay LinkedIn's expensive prices and you're going to end up getting blog visitors that don't convert. So it's kind of a scary proposition. Fortune 500s can do it. I don't recommend people who are on a tight budget to do that. On the other end, usually when we ask too much too soon, we're asking a cold audience, hey, come and talk to sales or buy something. Most of the time, that's not attractive enough that people just kind of brush you off. When they brush you off, you end up getting LinkedIn's going, well, we're not making very much money from you, so we have to raise your prices. So you end up paying higher, and a call to action like talk to someone is going to have a very low conversion rate. So you end up with these astronomically large, like $200 to $500 per lead kinds of numbers. So usually what we have to do is sit right in between there, where we're still asking for them to submit a form. We call it gated or lead magnets, but we're providing enough benefit that they actually care enough to say, yeah, that's valuable. I'll fill out my information to get that. So that's what I mean by meaty. But sometimes you can skip right to the bottom. If you've got an amazing offer, something where there's latent demand in the marketplace, or it's a new disruptive kind of product or service. And that's what I think we were testing on this campaign that we worked on together was, can we ask a cold audience to hop right into exploring an investment?
Well, so yes. So here's I think one of my takeaways, and we shouldn't get too deep into this because we're going to do something special for everybody later, a little bit deeper. But so what I'm hearing you saying is that you might not want to start your first advertising campaign on LinkedIn with a "come invest now," right? Yeah. Please write me a check.
Yeah.
Instead, and you don't want to point people to a blog, but what you might do, and I'm just kind of brainstorming with you, right? But what you might do, and what I think you're saying is more effective perhaps, is that you might create a high value white paper or some kind of insightful document from which you get top of funnel names, or what I've written down here is create a top of funnel lead magnet, after which you can then create your nurture campaign. So in the sense of a sales team, you would create something that somebody would buy into, and then a sales team might follow up.
Yes.
In the context of raising money, it might be something that demonstrates your leadership in your field of real estate. Yes. And then that allows you then to follow up and nurture them later, but not to say, please, write me a check.
Yeah, exactly.
On day one.
Yeah, and you could approach it from, okay, who is my ideal target audience? Oh, these are registered accredited investors. We know what kind of problems they face. We know what they care about, what keeps them up at night. So we're going to go and create a report of like I'm not coming up with something I'll hear on the fly, but
how to save taxes or something, with real estate investing. You can pick anything out, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And the closer you can get from them saying, yes, that's a pain point I feel, to yes, my product is the solution to their pain, the better. But I mean, as long as you have a piece of content where everyone who opts in, they are a prime candidate for you because they raised their hand and said, yes, this issue is plaguing me right now and I need this solved.
Now, to kind of getting into a little bit more detail, lead generation, there are two ways to generate a lead. One is to take people off-site, off LinkedIn, to a landing page that might have some sales jargon, some sales a sales letter of some sort and a lead gen form.
Yes.
Or you can do it on LinkedIn. Have you found better conversions one way or another?
Yes. This is quite the teeter-totter in my mind, because if you use the lead generation forms within LinkedIn itself, you end up with a much higher conversion rate. Sometimes it's twice as high. I'd say on average like 10 to 50% higher, but we've seen it double or triple. And the reason for this is when someone interacts with the ad, a drawer will slide down with the form, and LinkedIn's going to autofill everything that they can there. So their first name, their last name, their email address, it's all pre-filled out, and all the person has to do is just hit the submit button. It all loads immediately. I mean, it's a beautiful experience. The one downside to this, there are a few downsides, but the big downside here is that someone just converted with you without ever really seeing your logo and experiencing your brand. And a lot of times they may not even remember. I mean, if you email them immediately and they go back and check their box 2 days later, they might be like, wait, I didn't fill out a form. What are you talking about? And it's just, you're asking so little of them that they may forget. It may not make as large of an impression. So if you can send someone to a landing page you own on your website, it will be a higher quality lead, but you'll just get fewer of them. So that's really your trade-off.
Yes, that's right. And we did test that, didn't we, as well? Now, what about split testing? Let's talk about that. And I warned you beforehand that we are jumping all over the place. But But split testing is very different as well, isn't it, on LinkedIn than it is on Facebook. So just to contextualize this as well, on Facebook, I think we had at least a dozen different ads running at any one time with multiple audiences, maybe 120 different combinations. On LinkedIn, tell me something about the ideal split test scenario.
Yeah, the big difference here is with Facebook, Facebook's algorithm is brilliant. It knows so much about so many people that what you want to do most of the time is define a really large audience, and you tell Facebook, go and find my right people here. On LinkedIn, though, the algorithm isn't nearly as good. So I don't trust it with a large audience to go and find people. And at the same time, the targeting is so good that we get to really put people in these small test groups. They're called a campaign, but we can break an audience out by, are we targeting you because you're a member of an RIA's group? Or are we targeting you because your job title is investor, or because you have real estate investment skills? We can put all three of those targeting facets into separate campaigns and run the same 2 ads, the same A/B test to all of them. And now we get to learn. It's kind of like a silent focus group. We get to learn more about this audience. What do they care about? What do they engage with? And what type of targeting gives us the best quality, or the lowest costs, or the highest volume? There's just a lot more data.
Have you ever played this game Mastermind? I don't know if I asked you this when we first spoke.
That
Mastermind.
Sounds really familiar.
It's a game with colored pegs, and you put 4 pegs into a hidden, behind a hidden screen. It's a plastic game, and the person that's playing against you, or you're playing with, has to guess what your code is, right? What colored pegs you've got. And the way they do that is they put down 4 pegs on a row, and you score their pegs. Either yes, you got the right color but in the wrong place, or you got the right color in the right place, with black and white pegs. The point of that is it is a process of elimination. It's easy to play that game very, very fast.
Yes.
Because if you play it right, all you do is you put out one set of colors. And then, based on the answer, if you got the right color. And then if you do, you can progress.
Yes.
Right. So that's a very long way of saying I find Facebook staggeringly difficult, because with hundreds of different combinations, how the heck, even with their algorithm, how the heck do you know what moving part it was that really changed the dynamic? And one of the things that I enjoyed about LinkedIn was that the ads, and please talk about this, the ads that we put out, we only did 2 ads. There were only 2 variants, yet we had multiple audiences. So tell me something about that dynamic.
Yeah. What we find is with any, just like Facebook, you could put 20 ads in the same campaign and let LinkedIn or let Facebook try to show those, but both platforms are constantly on a mission to figure out which is the version that's performing higher, because if we show the version that performs high, we are giving members what they want and we're making more money, especially on LinkedIn, where you can say, I'm only going to pay when someone clicks. They care about what gets clicked on more. So long story short, if you launch, let's say 5 ads into a campaign, one is going to get the majority of the impressions, one's going to do okay, and then the other 3 are going to get like 10 or fewer impressions. And for me, as like the data scientist in me, I look at that and go, okay, if I took the time to create 3 ad variations that got less than 10 impressions, there's no learnings there. I can't learn anything about that. So we keep it to 2 ads at a time. And at any given time, if one or both of those ad versions aren't performing, we'll pause them both and launch a new A/B test. That way we're always giving LinkedIn exactly ads that we know that they're going to start pushing out.
That's interesting. Sorry.
Well, and to your point about the multiple audiences, we have 2 separate ads where maybe we kept the image the same, but we just changed the motivation or the pain point we hit on. We're going to put those same 2 ads in all of these different audiences. So, when you look in as a human, you're going to say, oh, this campaign, oh, it's the same 2 ads. To LinkedIn, these are different. But you can track and find out, ooh, if we target them by skill, they like ad A better. If we target them by group, they like ad B better. And now you can learn more.
fascinating, isn't it? That's the fun part, is looking at the data. So once you start running a campaign, now let's talk about audience selection in a moment. Once you start running a campaign, you've got a couple of ads and you've got, let's say, half a dozen different audiences that you're testing against both of these ads. How long does it take typically? Actually, let's ask this. How long does it take typically for the algorithm for LinkedIn to start to give you meaningful data?
Yeah.
And how much do you need to spend as well to get there? Let's get down to the down and dirty.
Brilliant question. So anytime you launch a new ad, LinkedIn has to give them enough impressions to get a feel for, does this get clicked on a lot or not very much? And that process usually takes about a day to a day and a half, where LinkedIn basically gives you a ton of impressions, not for free. They'll still charge you for them, but they give you kind of a preferred ranking where they can see how people interact with your ads very quickly. And after that day and a half, where they say, ooh, we gave this ad a relevancy score of 9, it performs extremely well, like 9 out of 10. Then they're going to say, hey, this is our winning ad. We should give it 60 or 70% of all of the impressions. So that's why you'll see with 2 ads where one gets 60 or 70% of the impressions and the other one doesn't. But even still, with 2 ads that don't get exactly half and half of the impressions, it's not usually a time thing. It's more of just an accumulation of data thing, where it's usually after spending about $1,000 when your ad variations, the difference in the click-through rate, becomes 95% statistically significant. And if you want to follow that down the funnel and get all the way down to conversions, it's to where your conversion rates and your cost per conversion become significant. That's usually between about $5,000 and $8,000, depending on how much those clicks cost.
And so we have a day. I lost my train of thought as we were talking. So we have a day that's it. So after a couple of days, you have, and a couple of $1,000, you've got this statistically significant difference between A and B ads.
Yes.
Do you pull, let's say A is the winner, will you then pull B and bring in C for the next 2 days to see which wins and constantly iterate that way?
It depends on what your goal is. What we find is the ad that gets the higher click-through rate, it doesn't usually correlate to the ad that's going to have the highest conversion rate. So I'm probably not going to pull that quick, because even if one ad has a click-through rate that's 20% higher than the other, if the one that's kind of getting ignored has a conversion rate that's double, which I've seen before, then I would be sad that I ended up pausing that. So based on click-through rate, I'll end up letting it run a little bit longer until we see conversions. But once we've spent, call it $2,000 to $4,000 on ads, and we found that one has a significantly higher conversion rate, that's when I'd make the call to yank the one that isn't performing.
Yeah, see, this is why it's tough raising money.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how many clicks there are or how many conversions. If a conversion is measured by somebody giving you their name and email address so you can communicate afterwards, it doesn't really matter. The only thing that matters is, did somebody write a check? And that's something that we have still yet to look at in this latest campaign to see, because you never know. But so it does require time, which actually is what dovetails into what we were talking about earlier, AJ, when we were talking about maybe for a real estate developer looking to raise money, you don't want to go out on LinkedIn and say, please send me a check. You want to go out and say, look how clever we are and how we can bring you value, right? We're a thought leader. We can bring you value. Come join us. We'll teach you more about what we do. And, you know, sub heading is, down the line, we'll ask you to invest with us. But today we just want to give you something of value. So let's talk now about audience selection, because this is also something that's very different. As I recall, having done this with you just in the last couple of weeks, not an easy thing to do on LinkedIn. It's very manually intensive, but there's some incredible details that we can get into. Tell me something about audience selection, why quality is so high on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So we can break most audiences down into 4 different ways of targeting the same person. So we can target them by job title. Oftentimes we can target them by the department they work in with their seniority. We can target by groups with seniority, and we can target by skills and seniority. And you can imagine very quickly how, whoever you're going after, yeah, they could fit into 4 different targeting criteria here. So we want to figure out, how do we reach this exact target audience several different ways? Because if we are running, let's say, 4 different campaigns, all targeting the same person a little bit differently, over time, we're going to find one that reaches people for less money, one that has better scalability. You can scale it up and spend and get more volume. One where lead quality is better, or one where lead quality is worse. So that's what we like to do. Like you kind of hinted towards, we don't really have amazing tools for doing things in bulk on LinkedIn. So when we go to define job titles, it's manually typing in up to 200 job titles, or going and finding the groups you want to target. You're manually entering those in. So it can be time intensive, but the nice thing is, once that audience is created, you can reuse that forever. I mean, it's evergreen.
And not only that, but you can also tweak it as well, can't you?
Oh, yes. Yep. At any given time, you can look at it and say, ooh, that list of groups, let's take out the one that's,
that does this instead
yes.
of that, and see how, and even split those 2 and see how they perform against each other.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of changing the angle a little bit, if you don't mind. Can you advertise on LinkedIn without having a good LinkedIn presence or good LinkedIn profile? And does it help if you do?
Ooh, excellent question. So all of LinkedIn ads are attached to a company's page, not a personal profile. And I get this question a lot from people who go, I haven't logged into LinkedIn in 6 years. Is that going to hurt my career or my campaign? No, it's not. No one will be able to look at your ad and see who the person is who is running it. But what they will see is your company's page, and they will see your logo. They will see the company's name, and they will see the most important part, which is the number of followers to the company. So if you have a company page that you haven't ever given any sort of attention to, it has 7 followers, chances are your ads probably aren't going to perform all that great, because people will look at it and go, ooh, 7 followers, that could be a fly-by-night. I don't know if I trust it. Or if you've got 200 or 300, they might go, oh, that passes my legitimacy requirement. Yeah, I'll interact with this ad. So the more social proof you have, the better.
Now that's crazy. So that's an interesting point you make. First of all, I don't know how many followers I have. I think it's around 15,000.
Yes.
So, right, but that's a personal profile.
Yeah.
My company profile has, I don't know, not 15,000,
yes.
not 300. Yeah. Very, very few, because actually most of my communication is my personal profile. The company profile is an afterthought, frankly. Yeah. I have it because you have to have it to advertise. LinkedIn like you to have it. There's a little push towards having it. So from my perspective, actually, and this is what I was getting at, all right, if you don't have even 300, you've got 10,000 followers on your personal profile and 10 on your company profile, as long as your company profile has good content that is informative and high value, to me anyway, it doesn't actually matter how many followers you have. As long as once somebody lands on your company profile, you are communicating intelligently with them. Who really it's not Facebook, it doesn't matter. Like I shouldn't say it. My wife, she likes to see likes. She wants to see likes. It doesn't work like that on LinkedIn. It's a different environment. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do for the most part. The number of followers is kind of like a threshold of, do I trust this company or not? And as long as you can get over that initial threshold, then it's what is this ad offering? Does this seem valuable to me? And we've had campaigns with a company page of 10 followers, but we're getting 20% conversion rates. And that's because the offer was just that good. People are willing to look past the, that threshold because what you're giving them is so obviously valuable.
Right. How many, all right, so let's see. Let me just run through, because I can't believe, I knew it would go fast with you, even though how far have you walked since we started? Let's start.
Just a little over a mile, so it hasn't been crazy. I slowed it down so I don't sound
I'm so glad that you are walking at basically my pace, even though I'm sitting stationary. We're not too far apart, I'm glad to say anyway. Right, so let me have a quick look. Okay, yes, so couple of questions. What works, I don't know if I've asked this before. All right, so let me ask you, what should you not do on LinkedIn when you're advertising? What would be like one big no-no?
I'll give you two because they're all kind of in the same process. When you go and build a campaign on Facebook, for instance, it's your first ad set, you don't know what you're doing. You see all these options and you just go, I don't know what that means. I'll just take the default. If you do that with Facebook, it's a pretty generous platform. You're not going to get screwed. Like, you may not have the best performance ever, but they're not going to take advantage of you. If you do the same thing on LinkedIn, you will get fleeced. And what I mean by that is there are two options that they select by default that are just poison for your campaign. So the first is there's a little checkbox that's enabled by default called Enable Audience Expansion. And basically what that means is when that box is checked, LinkedIn will say, hey, your target audience looks good. Let me find some other people to stick in there that I don't know what their motivation would be. Maybe people who aren't as competitive and they just want to show ads. But for whatever reason, they're muddying your audience targeting. They're taking what was very concrete and they're making it, messy. So make sure that box is unchecked so your audience isn't. I mean, if you're paying $8 to $11 a click, good heavens, like you might as well be ultra specific about who you're reaching. The next is when you get to the bottom of that page into the section of how you're going to pay for this campaign, LinkedIn will automatically default you to a type of bidding called auto bidding. And it's basically, LinkedIn, here's my wallet. Take whatever out of it you think you need.
Help yourself.
Right. Exactly. It's not my favorite. And what we find is auto bidding is more expensive about 90% of the time. And so the first thing I would tell someone, uncheck the audience expansion box and then tell LinkedIn, I'm only going to pay when someone clicks on my ad. That shows a level of commitment that I'm okay. Because auto bidding, you'll pay a certain amount whether someone clicks or not. And 90% of the time, cost per click bidding is going to be cheaper and bid significantly less than LinkedIn recommends. They're going to recommend something crazy like $12 to $30 per click. I mean, just set it at 6 or 7 and see what happens because you can always increase later.
Fascinating. Because we should start wrapping up. So I'm just going to go to some other kind of random questions. One is there any way to leverage, this may not be relevant for advertising, but is there any way to leverage influencers on LinkedIn?
Ooh, there can be. What we found, I had a client who partnered very closely with Damon John, the Shark Tank presenter, anyway, what we did is we got access to his account and showed ads on behalf of Damon John and he has a big enough brand. I mean, we could show this to anyone in business and chances are they would recognize the name. But we've also done this with not quite celebrity status, but maybe just showing ads to people's LinkedIn connections. And you can do that. You can go and export anyone's LinkedIn account to a spreadsheet. And there you have these columns of first name, last name, company, industry, title. And we can then take that same list, upload it back into LinkedIn ads, even though we don't have an email address. And LinkedIn's going to go, oh yeah, I recognize who that person is, and match that list at a very high rate. So imagine if you have an influencer, you can go to their connections and show them an ad that mentions their name or their company. And chances are they're going to respond at a very high rate because they know who this person is.
Okay, I got a little bit lost in that. First of all, that means that, just a sec. So if I know a sponsor who is extremely successful in raising capital, I can advertise to their connections.
Yes. Yep. You would just need to go to that person and say, can you download your list of connections?
Got it.
To me,
okay. Got it. Okay. So that's how you would leverage an influencer.
Yes.
Okay. I see. That's interesting. That is cool, actually.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Right. So let me ask you some sign-off questions, because otherwise we could go on forever. It's unfortunate. It's almost an hour already, AJ. Crazy.
We could go a lot longer.
We could, I know, and let's revisit. We talked about doing something a little more DNA later, so we'll bring that back and we'll introduce everyone to that later. But for today, let's wrap up. We've had a good conversation. Let me ask you 3 sign-off questions that I ask all my guests. And the first is, God, I've got so many I want to ask you. So let me go to my sign-off questions. I just have to do that. So for somebody, a real estate developer wanting to advertise and raise money on LinkedIn, what would be the most important thing that they should keep in mind? Your advice to them.
I would say get a clear profile of who your ideal target audience is, because we have so many controls on LinkedIn for how we target someone. And especially if you just want to dip your toe in the water, not spend a whole lot of money, you might as well be super specific about who that audience is before you even show them a single ad.
Investor avatar, very important.
Yes.
Second question. So what's been the hardest lesson you've learned on LinkedIn?
Oh, man. I keep getting proven wrong. I mean, we find these things like, and I hate looking stupid to a client, but we found very early on that short ad copy outperformed long. And so I went to one client and she said she wanted to run a really long ad. And I was just like, sorry, it's not going to work. We know it's not going to. And she went, well, it's working so well on Facebook. Let's just give it a test. And boy, I mean, 99% of the time, short copy outperforms long. But in this case, I put my full weight behind it and just said, I'm the expert. I know what works. And I was 100% wrong, looked real dumb. So there's been enough change in all the tests that we've run that I no longer feel that confident of any change or any prediction. So I just have lightened up and said, okay, the data is going to tell us this.
Exactly. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Test anything.
Yeah.
The client wants to do it. You know what? Let's give it a shot. You never know, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Final question. What are your key daily habits on LinkedIn that make you successful?
Oh, man. So first off, I treat my LinkedIn connections like an exclusive club. I don't want to be connected to you unless we actually do have something, really in common. I know you. We've talked, or you were a lead, or I was a lead to you, something like that. I want a really tight network. And what that does is when you're discriminating about who you let into your network, when you go to share something, the people who see your content when you're sharing tend to be your fans, the people who want to support you, and they will like and comment and share at a higher rate. And what that communicates to LinkedIn is, when Adam shares something, people find it valuable. We're going to give his content more of a boost. We're going to show it to more people. And that's how you have your content going viral, is LinkedIn saying, when Adam shares, people listen. This is great. So be discriminating about who you let in. You won't get all the spam pitches that go around so frequently, and your content will get a boost and you'll get in front of a lot more people that way. So I would just say be tight on who your network is.
AJ Wilcox, I am exhausted watching you. On your, what do you call that thing? It's like a treadmill desk or something. Yeah. What is that?
Yep, treadmill desk. And you'll get your Peloton, and we'll do the next one You'll get the desk on the Peloton.
But yeah, at least with your thing though, you can type and ever. With the Peloton, there's nothing you can do. You just pant a lot.
Yes.
Anyway, AJ, what a super pleasure. It was a pleasure, true pleasure working with you and your team on this ad campaign. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. AJ Wilcox, B2Linked.com. Thank you for joining me.
Adam, thanks so much for the invite.
That was AJ Wilcox, founder at B2Linked, and in due course, we're going to be producing a masterclass, all being well, on LinkedIn advertising, specifically oriented to commercial real estate pros like you wanting to raise money online. So go to the podcast page at gowercrowd.com to find out more about AJ and B2Linked, and be sure to sign up on any of the lead generation forms you find there. And in due course, I will send you an invitation to join us when we put all that together. And of course, keep in mind that those lead gen forms can be on your site too. So think about how they could be used to help you raise money. Let me know if you're interested, and I would be delighted to show you exactly how you can use the same systems as we have there at gowercrowd.com for your own purposes. All right, that's it. Thank you for listening, and thank you, AJ Wilcox, founder at B2Linked, for your time with me today. I cannot imagine when, if ever, I will have a podcast with somebody who spends the entire call walking as you did. It was a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. It's a true pleasure to work with you. And I'm delighted we have so many opportunities to keep that going. That is all for this episode. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you next time. And in the meantime, stay well. And for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.